Okay, let's go ahead and get started. As I said, I'm going to just, welcome everyone first. Hi, Leah. I didn't see you earlier. Who else did I not speak to?
Hi, Henry.
Yeah. So, welcome to the Institute for Global Transformations. This is our spiritual change makers book club. And today we are going to have on as our guest Don Ringgold, and he's going to be talking to us about health wealth, the Genesis Project from his new book. Before I get started on his book, here's what I'm going to do. For those that may not be familiar with the Institute for Global Transformation, I'm going to give you a little background on who we are. So, the Institute for Global Transformation was founded by Dr. Marianne Miller several years ago, and it's been going now. And the Institute is made up of a community of change makers, and together we are making the world a better place for everyone. And I'll get into how we're doing that. It has been said that there is a new humanity emerging, and the Institute for Global Transformation calls them the change makers. We come from all walks of life, all races, education, religions, socioeconomic status, ages, and spiritual development. As change makers, we are transforming our personal lives to become our very best selves. And in doing so, we are creating a global transformation toward a more loving, purposeful, wise, inclusive, cooperative, and peaceful world. So, so our vision is a world working together to utilize the power, love, and wisdom of higher consciousness to benefit humanity and the planet. Our mission is to support transformation in consciousness and in the way humanity interacts with one another so as to bring about a positive change in the world individually and collectively. Okay, so we start with the Institute for Global Transformation. We start with self. We start with personal transformation. Lao Tzu said, if you want to awaken all of humanity, then awaken all of yourself. Truly, the greatest gift you have to give is that of your own self transformation. So we ask you to join us here. Let your friends know to join us. It doesn't cost them anything. We feel that the best solution to the personal and societal challenges we each face in our day to day lives and spiritual journey is to join a community of like minded individuals who support one another. Your personal life experiences add to the wisdom of our community. So it is an honor for us to invite you to join us so that we can create lives of joy, abundance, success, inner peace, and service to humanity and the planet. So that's who we are. That's who the Institute for Global Transformation is. And as I said earlier, today we have with us Don Ringgold. And let me say this here, the book club that you're on today is one of several what we call community engagement programs. For instance, we have the live meditation that's on the third Tuesday of every month, and that's led by Walter, a young lady up from your neck of the woods, up right outside of Philadelphia, Lyra Tabaret. And we also have the spiritual happy hour, which takes place every Thursday night at 7:30 Central Time. So I'm going to get all these times right at some point. So, and then we have coming up, we have the uh, it's titled the Diane and Allen Show. It's about quantum thinking. So that's coming up as well. So as I said, this what you're on today is it's one of many programs that we have in our membership package. So let me go ahead and introduce the author here. Health Wealth, the Genesis Project, the missing link of the human mind. So the purpose of this project is disease prevention. The project is dedicated to all those who seek after truth. The Genesis Project is an investigative reporting from a communications perspective. It is a testimony from a spiritual point of view and a distinct application of the scientific method. So imagine a petition to the cosmic for freedom from disease. At that instance, the cloud moves. And by the way, I'm reading directly from the book now. The sun shines down in a beacon of light upon your being. Let us be perfectly clear that this discourse or this book is about identifying that disease is caused by our consumption of mucus-producing food, denatured food, and poisons. Whether we eat those poisons or they get into our bodies by some means unknown or known or unknown to ourselves, and the fact that we get accumulated waste that is difficult to remove and in some cases never get removed. So the author is presenting a complementary alternative to synthetic substances or any other means of healing outside of you. All the healing tools are within every human being. After more than 40 years of investigating the reasons we get sick, the author finds that when a person makes the decision to heal themselves, it is possible to end disease forever. Now, this is a strong claim, and I assure you that our author will be able to back it up today. It all depends on the person's willingness to be obedient to the will of the mind of all creation and Mother Nature. Once the will within a person is harmonized, the choice one makes attracts healing, harmonious foods, thoughts, words, and action. So let us work for the living and eat from the tree of life in all that we think, say, and do. Let us go to the valley of our consciousness to concentrate, contemplate, meditate, and pray so that we make a harmonious choices and use our stumbling blocks as stepping stones to the sacred mountain of our soul's consciousness. Let it be said that our actions and experiences produce agents of divinity. There is a place where there is peace for everyone and everything. To be in and at this place depends on the decisions to be there or to be somewhere else in the thinking process. Recognition of energy here and other places represents the possibility for balance and harmony. Therefore, studying the nature and qualities of the energies makes a significant difference in bringing on the harmonium. As this life is experienced, direction in accord with the greater light is ultimately beneficial for all. Mother Nature sees all and knows all the efforts human beings make. She gives the final summation. Light on the subject of disease prevention is a significant factor for the future of humanity. Disease is defined in one of our ancient documented texts written by H. Spencer Lewis from 1941 and those that some of you know the name H. Spencer Lewis. For those that don't, H. Spencer Lewis was the founder of the Rosicrucian order AMARC in this cycle in the United States. So what H. Spencer Lewis wrote, let's see, disease is defined in an ancient document as he wrote that it's a local or general disturbance of the harmonious constructive process of the living creative cells. So regardless of the cause, the condition is fundamentally the same. The disturbing, breaking down process among the diseased cells is being strongly or weakly fought by the constructive powers of the healthy cells. Nature attempts to end the destructive and renew the diseased cells and restore health. The battle calls for concentration of energy and robs the general system of its normal status, while the disease is also disqualifying many cells, organs, tissues, and parts of the body for normal constructive work. hence fevers, weakness, mental and physical disturbance, and pains. The logical procedure is to help nature, mostly by not interfering and by ending the cause of the disturbance when it is known. Proper breathing, proper eating, proper exercise, sleep, and thinking are the first essentials in helping nature and removing the causes of interference. Given to the blood, the nerves, and the general system that which was lacking and which caused the disturbance or is now lacking in helping to restore normalcy is the next essential. Hence, the various schools of therapeutics may assist and contribute to the restoration of health, but solely through assisting nature. While so-called death or transition is inevitable, disease is not necessary. And I'll repeat that. While so-called death or transition is inevitable, disease is not necessary. The physical body can reach a state of age and exhaustion where the breaking down process of cells and parts of the body is more rapid than the reconstruction. And as a principle of economy, the soul will cast off or vacate the body and await another and more useful one. But such breaking down and gradual weakening of the whole system need not be accompanied by any specific disease and can be free from any pain or suffering. So that is the preface and the introduction to the book, Health, Wealth, the Genesis Project. And so on that note, what I'm going to do, I'm going to read a brief intro by about the author. He's joined us now, and then I'm going to give you my own personal intro. So the book is a result of the author's experience from age 14 after observing for 2 weeks the death of his stepfather, Hamilton Sr., from colon cancer. And I'm going to let him talk a little bit about that. After attending the Community College of Philadelphia, where he studied, where his studies included biology, anatomy, and physiology, he earned an associate's degree in general studies, a Dean's List graduate. He continued studies at Temple University, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on a tennis scholarship, and was graduated with a Bachelor of Science degree from the Annenberg School of Communications, with a master's degree in business administration from Grand Canyon University in Phoenix, Arizona, and continues as a doctoral student in the School of Education at the Grand Canyon University, with a dissertation topic of servant leadership and the traditional education of the disease prevention problem. So the author, Don, went on to become a tennis professional and a professional communicator, and continued his education with an esoteric school of higher consciousness, which some of us on here knows affectionately as the ancient and mystical order of the Rosy Cross, also known as the Rosicrucian Order Amark. Okay, so let me say how I met Don and give my own personal introduction of him. Don and I met about a year ago. I was up with my wife in Philadelphia visiting our relatives for the Christmas holiday, and we visited one of the local organizations, the Benjamin Franklin Pernez, which is our affiliate of the Rosicrucian Order. And there was this gentleman there who, after typically in some of these, once you have your regular exercises, there's usually a social hour. And there was this gentleman who was particularly animated and sharing some quite ancient and very interesting information on symbolism. So I knew that this was going to be a different day. So I made it a point to afterwards talk to Don and get to know him a little bit more. And actually, we ended up going back over there. And Don shared with me some information about his personal life. We had a great talk. Turns out his family knows some of the jazz greats. He let me know that he was a communicator. radio communicated. Turns out we had a conversation with one of the great Dick Gregory's. I hosted Dick Gregory when he was here in Dallas. Don had met Dick Gregory and hosted him. So we had some things in common. And then it turned out that 10 years prior to that, I was in Philadelphia in a newspaper. Someone did an interview. They were there at the Proneas doing an interview talking about the Rosicrucian Order. And I just happened to be from out of town. So she interviewed me. And later when I saw the article, some 10 years later, because I didn't see it when she finished it, I saw Brother Ringgold in there. And so we had crossed paths. He wasn't, I don't know if he was there that day. I don't think he was, because we would have known each other. But anyway, since this meeting, Don and I have talked on the phone. And as I said in my email, I've affectionately come to refer to Don as my personal health coach, because he has taken some fear out of me regarding some issues that I had dealt with personally. And he's given me not just hope, but he's given me the requisite tools to overcome and restore my body to full health. And I can tell you right now, it's been working. So to that, I'm very appreciative. So, and every time I talked to him, I told him, Don, you gotta get this message out, because the way you frame it and the way you put it, I don't hear anyone else doing it that way. Don goes back 3,000 years. So on that note, I'm gonna let him talk about why he takes this conversation back 3,000 years. And, so without any further ado, Don, I'll let you come to the platform. You're going to have to unmute yourself.
Peace profound, everyone. Thank you for your patience and your kindness, and we're all here. So, Henry, you're such a beautiful individual, you and your wife, Vanessa, and I just want to thank you, and we'll just move forward. Speaking of 3,000 years ago, Moses talked about, let the herbs be thy meat. That's in Genesis 1:29. And it impressed me when I was 14 years old. And as I grew up, in the last 22 years, I can report to you that Moses was right. We as human beings can live and be strong following that direction of eating organic fruits, green leafy starchless vegetables, and sometimes nuts. And it may take a while for us to really understand how that can actually happen. Humanity is in a place now where we could say that there's an addiction. And I think every individual has to really ask themselves, am I addicted to the things that cause disease? So at this point, Henry, it seems to me very possible that if we in this country, or we as individuals, decide to study, investigate, test, and experiment, we can begin to connect with that law of love, that DNA, if you will, that is within us. We have a heartbeat that is an example of our connection with that law of love, the all of creation. So based on that fact, every human being can make a transition from non-living to living foods. We wonder why there is so much tension in the world. This tension is actually within ourselves as individuals. There was Pythagoras. Pythagoras made a wonderful evaluation. Pythagoras, if we're not familiar with him, was a person who said, you cannot get into my school unless you geometrize. So he gives us this angle to consider. As long as men continue to destroy ruthlessly the living beings from the lower kingdoms, they will know neither health nor peace. As long as they massacre animals, they will each other. In effect, whoever sows murder and suffering cannot reap joy and love. And as we mentioned, that was about 3,000 years ago. So we've had this possibility all along, but because of this addiction, we've been creating an untruth. I wanted to say it nicely, sometimes commonly known as a lie. So we lie to our bodies. Our bodies think that it should have certain things, and then the result of that is illness. So what do we do from here? If we in this United States of America could institute organic and sustainable farming, then I believe we begin to solve the problem. The other thing is study, investigate, test, and experiment. And that's just another way of saying disease prevention education. But you know what? We don't have to depend on anyone else. Each individual, because we have that truth within ourselves, we can do it for ourselves. Now, the problem comes in when other people get involved, because families with, different people, everyone doesn't have that same kind of willingness. So here's the thing. Whatever we eat, enjoy it. And be a good example. We don't want to make anybody unhappy. We don't want to make ourselves unhappy. So in making this transition, the important thing about studying is making sure that we visualize what is going to be the result of this action that I'm taking right now. What is the result? Well, for instance, every time we eat, it is an experiment. So if I'm eating in the morning, let's say I'm a person highly encumbered, which means I have a lot of waste in my system. And by the way, that is the missing link of the human mind, our ability to properly eliminate accumulated waste. And that's the big problem that we have in making the transition. Because as we go about making a transition, if we try to get rid of the waste too quickly, let's say that we decide to make a change, and then we're going to eat fruits, and I'm eating healthy, and then all of a sudden we feel really badly. That happens when we do not study. So that's why I'm saying if we visualize what's going to happen and then implement that vision, then we're going to prevent a crisis. So if we're highly encumbered, then raw vegetables might not be a bad idea, because what we want to do is sweep out the colon. We don't want poisons to rush out of the system, because that's the shock. That would create a crisis. We want to make a slow transition. So we can take our diet, whatever it is we're eating, and start eating organically. Same choices, just organically. And in that way, what we're doing is we're choosing living foods. People say, well, I'm going to get some carbohydrates. I'm going to get a donut. What the visualization can be is, okay, I'm going to go buy donuts today. But when I go buy donuts this time, they're going to be with organic ingredients. And so therefore, that's how we can start to make a transition from non-living to living foods, by making the choices of consuming living foods. Now, let's say I like chicken. Well, I would check to see how the chickens were fed, or the beef, how were the cattle fed? So Jethro Klaus, who wrote Back to Eden, who, by the way, raised 8 children on a plant-based diet. And for instance, the child went from mother's milk to apple juice, to applesauce, to chunks of apples in the applesauce, to apples, and then on to a regular plant-based diet. So a good menu might be, if your body is able, we talked about people who have accumulated waste, so they can start with the raw foods, go to green leafy starchless vegetables, have maybe brown rice and beans. That would be considered a mucus-lean diet, a good transitional kind of diet. And let's say with that, a salad, brown rice, beans of your choice. Right now I'm thinking pinto beans. And if that doesn't fill you up enough, then a baked potato. Now that would be for dinner. It actually could be any time, but that's more in my mind, as I visualize a transition, that would be for dinner. Now for breakfast, it depends on the system. You could take a handful of fruit. Let's say a handful of strawberries. It could be anywhere from 9 to 15 strawberries, and that could be your breakfast. Prior to that, what we have to consider, and this is a very important point, we have to consider the nutrients, because as the poisons come out, we want to make sure that the body is receiving nutrients. So then the thing is to evaluate things like, and I'm going to mention some products here, Amazing Grass Green Superfood, and this is before you actually get to the berries. Amazing Grass Green Superfood gives you the nutrients that you need, because what we're looking at here is a formula that Arnold Ehret, Professor Arnold Ehret, all these books that I'm mentioning are part of the reference section in the Genesis Project, Don Ringgold's Health, Wealth, the Genesis Project. So Professor Arnold Ehret had this formula that is very useful. V equals P minus O. We talked about the proper way to eliminate accumulated waste. Vitality equals power minus obstruction. So we slowly and gradually eliminate the accumulated waste by eating the green leafy vegetables and sometimes fruit if they agree with you. And as we eliminate this accumulated waste, we can then start to eat steamed vegetables and move on to the organic fruits. Again, the important thing is to prevent the crisis by studying. I could go on in case in case you have some questions, brother. I can continue.
I want to ask a general question because in the email I sent out, so I'm gonna shake it up a little bit, and then I'll let you. In the email I sent out, and I don't remember my exact wording, but it basically said that a person could, well, I do have it here in front of me. It says if a person's health is in harmonium, this person's can unmask, and you deliberately put the word unmask in there, the problem of disease prevention, uh, education, find a solution, and know that a virus or bacteria can destroy or alter their harmony, balance, and wellness in relationship with others as well. So Don, I want you to address this issue, and I want to be sensitive about this because I think each one of us on the call have had someone in our families that have been affected by this um, most recent pandemic, and in some cases, we've had family members who have been uh, tested, perhaps, and tested positive, and in some cases, it was reported that they died from this. So, given that backdrop, your book says that we can be free of all disease. And I know you said on another call, we have the right to breathe clean oxygen. So, how can you address this with the backdrop of what's going on right now?
Yes. Yes, I am one of those who have experienced the loss of a loved one during this COVID-19 experience. And so let me just initiate dealing with this problem by saying, for those of us who have lost a loved one, may their souls rest in peace and may light perpetual shine upon them. And for those who are sorrowful and going through the sorrow, let's hope that the sorrow is transformed into reverence, and the reverence transformed into joy, remembering the joy of that loved one. And then we are able to share our love with the living. So COVID-19 is the kind of phenomenon that promulgates fear. I think we can agree to that. In other words, we're wearing a mask, we're washing our hands with substances that actually have poison in them. I looked at, someone gave me some alcohol. He said, here, put this on your hands. And I read the label. It said, Blue 19. It is so important for us to read labels. So what has happened is, okay, that Blue 19 is poison, by the way. And what we're in a position to do is recognize how to eliminate consuming non-living foods. In other words, mucus-producing foods, poisons, and poisons are pesticides, additives, something like what I'm talking about. This blue is a red dye and with a number and so forth. And I think you know what I'm saying. Okay, so we want to eliminate the consumption of mucus-producing foods, poisons, and accumulated waste. It is, I won't say any of it easy, but I will say what is easier is recognizing the poisons and not consuming them. Getting rid of accumulated waste, that depends on the individual system, their body system, how much accumulation is in the system. Overall, it could take 1 to 3 years to eliminate the waste. But the fact of this matter is that we're wearing a mask, which means we're afraid to breathe because we're afraid that we will give the disease to someone or someone will give the disease to us. Now, fear is not a bad thing, but when it isn't addressed correctly, then it moves into a mistake. Therefore, I think we as human beings are in a position to really look into ourselves and figure out how are we going to cause ourselves to be so healthy that we no longer have a fear. And here's why. Jethro Klaus, that I mentioned earlier, in his book, Back to Eden, makes a very emphatic statement. Jethro Klaus says, when the blood is clean, no virus or bacteria can cause any problem. In other words, cannot cause a disease. And I know that's hard to believe, but here's the thing about everything we're talking about. If we live it, then we know the truth. I can report to you personally, when I heard about this COVID-19, first thing I said to myself, well, after 22 years of life, living life disease-free, what do I have to be afraid of? I'm not going to get sick. I'm not going to cause anyone else to get sick. So what do I have to be afraid of? Having that experience is why I was able to say that kind of thing. And I've said that to some other people, and the report is, well, are you arrogant? Are you, in other words, they're not understanding our capabilities. A vaccine would be another untruth to our system. We're given a magic mirror. Our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue will tell us if we're sick. And the thing about it is, all human beings are on the verge of illness. The question is, to what degree? So in this time, and especially this time, I say especially this time because if we noticed on December 21st, Jupiter and Saturn were aligned in a way that they haven't been aligned in 800 years. And someone mentioned that, well, that was around the time of the Renaissance. So even the stars are telling us we can get our house together. We can get our individual houses together, and we can get our collective house together, because each one of us is a cell in the blood of humanity. So if we clean our individual house and have clean blood, and other people see us do that and work on it themselves, then what we will end up with is a way to transmute fear into courage. And it will be arrogance. It will be having done the work to have a humble sense of confidence, because it's doing the work of the Most High. If you're a Christian, you can say it's God's work. If you're an atheist, it is the vibrations that you're putting in place to create radiant light, abundant life, illuminating love. And by illuminating, I mean fire that is affecting the intellect and opening the heart and the mind to harmony. So it really doesn't matter what a person thinks about, well, everything matters. But what I'm saying is that every human being has the opportunity to get on board, because this is the destiny of humanity. It's going to happen. If we look at what's happened in the last, this way. In 2004, up to now, 2021, the people interested in plant-based diet application has increased 3,000%. The United Nations estimate of people in the world is 7.8 billion, and 78 million are people interested in a plant-based diet, 1%. But that is impressive in that from 2004 to now, it's a 3,000% interest. So what I'm saying is we have it within our being. It's going to happen. So instead of focusing on a vaccine, let us focus on the truth. If we focus on no longer giving ourselves untruth and giving ourselves the truth, which is growing food in a way that Mother Nature intended, which, by the way, is what organic means. That food is being grown in the way that Mother Nature intended. If we do it that way, that's how we deal with this COVID. Because otherwise, it's going to be business as usual. We keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. When you have the opportunity to create results that are life-giving, then why would we want that? Some people would say, well, I'm too old, you know, let's put it this way. Henry and I were talking about this. There was this fighter, a heavyweight champion named Archie Moore, which probably you all are familiar with, or if you're not. Archie Moore was a fighter, and I believe that he was a light heavyweight champion. And I think he might have been somewhere in his 40s, but let's say 44. And they told him, you can't fight for the heavyweight championship. You better stay in that light heavyweight championship section or status. He said, age is a 3-letter word meant to confuse. Changing from non-living to living foods is a matter of spiritual adjustment. The power of creation will give you protection if you study, investigate, test, and experiment. And that's why it says in Thessalonians, test everything and find that which is true. Now, what happens is people who are highly encumbered, like I was saying earlier, would try to make the transition and say, oh, I ate good food and it made me sick. Well, that's why the studying comes in, because it's not the food that made them sick. It's what was in their system from the past. And the good things coming into the system was pushing out the bad things, made them feel really bad, because that was the system telling them, well, listen, sooner or later, you're going to feel bad. That's why I would rather have the problems of, am I going to get enough nutrients today? Rather than saying, do I have to go to the doctor and get this test and that test? And am I going to be sick? In other words, we should know our bodies. We should listen to our bodies and know if we're going to get sick or not. Because that's our job. That's our responsibility. We have put the responsibility into the hands of other people. And it's okay to talk to other people and get their opinions and help. They may help you. But the whole point is you have within yourself, every human being has within themselves the power of creation that they can give them everything they need. And there's enough books out here to give us a good foundation. So there it is, Brother Henry. The COVID-19 is a problem because we, for instance, even in the 1500s, we were talking about the Renaissance, even in the 1500s, people would go to the priest for the solution. And the churches used to have right next door to the church, they had the herbal store. I'd like for us to find an herbal store next to a church today. Well, if we go to Washington, D.C., there is a building that they had as an herbal store, but are they using it as an herbal store today? Last time I was there, they weren't, but maybe it changed. let's hope for the best. But what I'm saying is that it's up to us. We were talking about Martin Luther King and I want to do God's will. We were talking about Malcolm X. You've been tricked. You've been bamboozled. You've been hoodwinked. But you can't blame it on anybody else but yourself. Because we were given and have everything we need. But when we get this kind of willingness, listen to me on this one, because I'm going to say this word, most of us will know what I mean. Prevaricating spirits, lying spirits get into our heads and make us think, oh, you're doing the wrong thing, you know? The thing about it is that when that colon is clean, we will get such revelations where we will find all we really need is air. It hasn't been determined how long a person can go without food. I have been in positions where all I had to eat was an apple a day for 60 days and survived and played tennis while going through that. Not very well, but I played anyway. But all I'm trying to say, everyone, is the reason we're here is because you're interested in this subject. And it's not just for us. Somebody said to me, Don Ringgold, you're just trying to control everything. I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is not about Don Ringgold. I think I said it earlier or alluded to it. This is about the evolution of human soul consciousness. This is divine law. We can't break the law. We have to comply with it. Man has come up with all these things, so we say, oh, well, I don't have enough money to buy this or buy that. Yes, you do. And let's say we go with, no, I don't. Where there's a will, there is a way. And we're not doing this just for ourselves. We're doing this for the future generations. So the best thing we can do is either talk about it. The best thing is be a good example. This is not about condemning other people who don't do it. This is about being that good example, giving them hope because you have the faith and are willing to go deep within your heart and bring forth those virtues of charity and love. And that's a legacy that we can leave for our next generations. One of the problems that we're having is that some people, I was getting ready to say the children, but some people aren't recognizing that this spirit that we're talking about is just like a radio wave. So we can tune into radio, or any radio station that we like, or any television station, we know that. But what I'm talking about, and what Moses was talking about, and many people were talking about and are talking about, is tune in to that which is love. Because when you tune into that, it's going to give you the power that you need to be that good example. So there it is, brother Henry. COVID-19 is what it is. The power structure can make $3 trillion on this vaccine. But the power structure has its, whatever it is. We as individuals can do it for ourselves. That's the beauty of it. We don't have to do anything. Somebody said, well, wait a minute. I'm going to die anyway. What do I have to do that for? It's not about longevity. Longevity has its place. It is about living without suffering. Someone came to me the other day and said, well, I looked in Genesis and it said you could eat anything that flies. That's after the flood, where it says you live to be 79. In Genesis 1:29, before the flood, it gives 120 years. But the whole point is, let's investigate, as it says in Thessalonians. Let's investigate. Because if you investigate it, what are the results of eating something dead? The results are decomposition. As soon as an animal gets killed, they excrete fear, because just before they got killed, that fear is there. So in other words, they excrete poisons. So the human being consumes that poison. That becomes a part of the human blood system. So why would we want to consume something that is going to continue to decompose? It is going to stimulate our body. That's why we think if we eat a steak, we're doing something. Jethro Klaus says, or actually Arnold Everett says, if you eat 2 organic apples, it's more nutritious than a steak dinner. And I'm sitting here testifying to you, reporting to you that that is true. Someone said to me, well, you know, I read that book that you talked about, that Edmund Bordeaux-Sekeli translated from the Aramaic, what he called the Essene Gospel of Peace. He went into the Vatican, according to him, he went into the Vatican, he found this information and this Jesus teaching. Now, Jesus is teaching that once you cleanse out the system, you will never be sick. But if you Google that book, the Essene Gospel of Peace, it'll say it's a fraud. But I tested it. How long do you test something? Is 22 years long enough? Well, it is for me. And so that book, if you read that book, you will find out the truth. If you read the book and if you implement what Jesus is saying, because he's telling the people how to, well, from his perspective, he's saying how to get rid of your sins. From a mundane perspective, it's just how do you get rid of the accumulated waste. So again, our focus is on the truth. The stimulation. Again, I would rather have the stimulation and the nutrients rather than just the stimulation that eventually is going to cause the disease. So, Brother Henry, does that give a perspective on this COVID-19?
Yes, it does. Thanks for that, Don. So I want to open up the floor to questions, and I want to also say from an administrative perspective, I know we are over our typical time, but and anyone have to leave, we would be understanding of that, but I'm going to keep the channel open to have this discussion to anyone that wants to continue it. So Once again, I want to reiterate, technically we're a little over our time, but so Don, I want to ask one question, and you can give a as brief an answer as you want, or but then I want to open it up to questions because there's this line of thought out there that says follow the science. So I hear what you said, but are we following the science? So let me hear your perspective on that, and then I'll let others ask questions.
Absolutely, yes, following science. But I want to qualify that. Like I said earlier, we're all on the verge of disease. So the question is, to what degree? Well, it's the same thing with science. This way of living goes through, we have the problem, and then we do the experiments, we come up with the hypothesis, and then we come up with the theory, and then we come up with the law. And as I said, this is about attuning with the law of love. So these are spiritual laws. So I think when we ask that question of science and the people that are promulgating, is it the science or I'm following the science? Let's remember this. Before there was science, there was mystical science. And I'm talking about the deep aspect of going into ourselves and going into the information. And that's what I'm talking about also with education. Education has the responsibility to find that which is lost. Humanity had all of this information, but lost it. So we're in this COVID-19 because of that very fact. So yes, this constitutes the administration of or application of the scientific method, just from science itself. But again, this problem is a spiritual problem. And what is spirit? The rate of vibration. If we hold our hands about 12 inches apart and we bring them closer together, right here is where I can feel that which I cannot see. So, but I know there's something there. We talked about the radio waves. In other words, there's infrared, there's ultraviolet, there are those things that we can't see. There's the sixth sense. We talked about the five senses. The sixth sense, there is that fourth dimension, and there are other dimensions. There's eternal life that some people talk about. All I'm saying is science has always been in the position to dig deeper. And you could call it, some people call it metaphysics, quantum physics, going deeper. And all we have to do is go deeper within ourselves. So does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. So I'm going to open the floor up and see if anyone else has any questions for you. And again, I want to reiterate, this program is going to be recorded and edited and put on the, and when I say edited, probably the beginning parts, and put on the internet on YouTube. So anyone that has to leave, we understand, but I want to keep the channel open to anyone that has some specific question, because we are in a very testing time right now and our health is of utmost importance. So I want to give you the opportunity, if you have questions or comments, to do that. So with that, go ahead. You have to unmute yourself, by the way.
I have a question. So, how do we begin this journey? Some of us have eliminated certain things from our diet, but have not gone that extra mile to eliminate all the foods that aren't living out of our diet. So how do we begin this journey? I know some people can go cold turkey and eliminate everything, and some people need a little more time. So what would you suggest we do as an initial start on this journey?
First thing comes to mind is eat organically. Whatever it is that the individual is consuming, consider how to consume that same thing, but organically. So that is the first step. It's a gradual process. Generally, it takes 1 to 3 years. So because it's a gradual process, I'll tell you exactly how it happened for me. For about 5 years, I tried to just eat nothing but fruit, green leafy vegetables, starchless vegetables, and nuts. And I did it. But being an athlete, I felt like I needed to come back. So I did come back to eating chicken and what's that kind of fish? It's a deep sea fish. Anyway, deep sea fish if you're going to eat fish. But the thing about a fish is the reason they're flopping up and down when they come out of water is because they're suffocating. How would we feel if someone, held our nose and suffocated us? But yeah, it's a gradual process, and whatever you eat, enjoy it. For instance, eggs. I used to eat eggs, and the process of transitioning out of eating eggs, that eventually I came to bee pollen, because bee pollen gives you B12. Animals in the wild don't know anything about these, what we're talking about, vitamins and stuff, but yet they know, and they eat one thing at a time. But that's how I would do it, Vanessa. I would first eat organically. And then if I was highly encumbered, I would eat the raw foods and still being comfortable, but the raw foods I would eat as a cleanser, like a sweeping the system. And then as my system was cleansed, then I would steam the vegetables, because what the blood needs is fruit sugar. So when we steam vegetables, they still call that, or more specifically, Arnold Ehret calls it fruit sugar. So the blood needs that. Of course, it needs iron, and it needs the minerals. I am more concerned about the minerals than I am about protein. So again, I think to answer your question, organic food is the best transition, or the best way we can make or start the transition. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but I do have a follow-up question. Something you said, so why are you more concerned about the minerals than protein?
Because they are where the power is. The potassium, the magnesium, and I should mention fiber as well. And again, see, I'm mentioning nutrients and minerals, but again, the animals don't know that. When an animal like a lion eats another animal, they eat blood, bones, and all immediately. We are not going to do that. And by eating the fruits, we're getting the carbohydrate. That's another word that animals don't know, but what I'm saying is we're getting that fruit sugar. So the reason why I put more emphasis on the minerals than the protein is because the protein often can be too rich. And by too rich, I mean that it, I won't say clogs up the blood, which incidentally, that's why I stopped eating eggs. And I start putting in the bee pollen. And bee pollen, and I'm coming back to finishing up your point, but the bee pollen that I'm taking twice a day, some people have a problem. 0.5% of the populace are allergic to bee sting, and I've run into people who had that problem. They still took the bee pollen, and no problem. Again, some people, when they take that bee pollen, it may give them an adverse reaction because they have the poisons in their system. And then they never go back to it because they had a bad experience. So it's so important to cleanse the system first. So yeah, to answer your question, the reason why I put more emphasis on the minerals is because the protein is too rich and can, I'm going to say it this way, can actually poison the blood. When I'm eating for protein, beans and rice make a perfect protein. There are the amino acids, the building blocks of the protein in the bee pollen. More specifically, Vanessa, dead animal protein. That is the protein that is not really any food. And that's what causes mucus and poisons in the system. So if I'm going to eat protein, which I do, I'm going to eat the, I personally like peanut butter. But there was a time, and I still would do it, but I'm just not doing it right now. There was a time I ate what they call a snack mix. And it's got a variety of nuts and seeds, unsulfured, by the way. And you eat those with raisins or dates. And that's a source of protein that won't harm you. So I think I've qualified that the protein I'm more concerned about not consuming is the dead protein. The protein that I am consuming and that I think the human being, can consider is the living protein, the nuts and seeds. But again, you see, you have to remember that the body accumulates certain things. So you don't want to put too much in the system because it kind of makes you feel like this if you consume too much protein, even good living protein. And the minerals don't make you feel that way. The minerals just make you feel super. They make you feel like you have vitality. And that's another thing too, because I use a product called the Energizer, but I use it.
I hate to interrupt.
What's that?
I hate to interrupt. I hate to interrupt. I've got to leave.
Walter. Hey,
Yeah,
Walter. Hey, everybody. This is my mentor, and my friend, and my father, and my brother, and he raised me.
I have enjoyed, and all I have to say is right on. And I hope I can get into that cleansing mode in order to stay as healthy as I can. Hello to everybody and goodbye to everybody.
Thank you for joining us, Walter. Great having you with us.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you. Peace and love.
Peace, profoundly.
So right. Vanessa, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well,
you know what? I just thought of one more thing. There is this product because one of your questions was about soy, and that's always come up. And in my book, I talk about soy, and it isn't necessary, but you do want to think about the fact that if we look at Asian people for 3,000 years, I think they ate soy, like tofu. So organic, and that's another source of protein, by the way. I do eat it. I'm not against it, but once or twice a week is the recommendation. There's soy ice cream, there's soy this, there's soy that. We have to be careful about these products when we go into the market, because a lot of these products have too much fat that is associated with the soy. So I think it's important to look at the ingredients. So that's another aspect of the protein issue. I go into, I'm going to mention this. I go into Whole Foods and I get this product called General Tso's vegan chicken. They also have a vegan salad that I just can't handle. But the vegan chicken, I can eat 1 or 2 of the nuggets and I'm okay. And I used to make this spaghetti and vegan meatballs. Lately, I'd say in the last few years, I haven't done that, but I used to do that. Again, look at the label, make sure there's not too much salt, and ideally organic soy if you're going to eat it.
There's a question in our chat room about possible books to check out.
Okay. In the back of Don Ringgold's Health, Wealth, and Genesis Project, there is Arnold Ehret's Mucusless Diet Healing System. Professor Arnold Ehret's Mucusless Diet Healing System. Now, Arnold Ehret is my teacher in regard to disease prevention. I have studied his work for over 40 years. I continue to study his work because Arnold came up with something. He said, do you realize that it takes 14 pounds of pressure outside of the body to cause you to breathe? Well, I never thought about that. And he has a plethora of things in that book that will assist a person to be able to make a transition from non-living to living food. So that's Professor Arnold Ehret's Mucusless Diet Healing System. He has another book called Rational Fasting, which is excellent. And when it comes to fasting, 1 to 3 days is, I think, the best kind of fast. Now, I already mentioned about the apple fast for 60 days, and incidentally, it's always, water is always involved. I think we know that. Another book that I have already mentioned is Jethro Klaus's book, Back to Eden. He's got an excellent, there's so many excellent chapters. I first came in contact with this book because I met a person who healed themselves from cancer just by reading that book. And in my book, I do talk about the colonic, the enema, because Jesus talks about it. And Arnold Ehret talks about it also. And just about all the books, there's Hereward Carrington, The Natural Food of Man, talks about it. Enemas maybe aren't for everyone, but I think that everybody should read that chapter. Actually, everybody should read all these books I'm talking about, to be honest with you. But Jethro Klaus's chapter on enema, on golden seal, on cancer, on food, on oranges. Those chapters are so important to help a person transition from non-living to living foods. Okay, so that's that one. Then there's the Essene Gospel of Peace, that I find to be the truth, that some people will say it's a fraud. It's a million seller, and Jethro Klaus sold 3 million copies of his book. Those are the books. Okay, there's another one, especially this one you can use as a reference book. It's called Prescriptions on Nutritional Healing by Dr. and Nurse Balch, B-A-L-C-H.
On that note, Fred, I think I misunderstood the question, but I'll the gentleman that asked the question has suggested some books, and I'll send those out to everyone. So I will say all these books Don have mentioned is in the reference section of his book. So get this book, and all those the best research he's done is listed in there. So I urge you to either. I had the digital copy of this for about a year, and then recently I ordered the hard copy. So are there any more questions? Yeah, sure. Are there any more questions? Well, what we're going to do is I'll send this information out.
What about growing our own food? There was one.
Yeah, what about growing our own food, including sprouting and vertical gardening? Do you recommend?
Of course, that's ideal. If you can do that, you've got your own supermarket. But you have to make sure, and this is also in Back to Eden, you have to be sure about the soil. Is the soil without contaminants? And the water. Is the water without contaminants? The fertilizer. Is the fertilizer without contaminants? So all those things have to be studied, and after studying it, meditating on it, then you make your decision and go ahead. Yes, by all means, we all should be doing that.
I want to take the opportunity to circle back to a point you made on bee medicine, the bee pollen, because there's a gentleman, there's a beekeeper on the call here, and he's written a book on bee medicine. So I want everyone on the call to elaborate on what Don said. After you purchase his book, go out and purchase. Charles, I'll let you tell what your book is called, Bee Medicine, because we had a whole conference on that, and he's an expert on it.
Well, thank you, Henry. Yes, Don, you talked about bee pollen, and I'm a big advocate of bee pollen in all its applications. It's wonderful for the body. As an athlete, I'm a tennis player too, and I've used bee pollen even in my changeovers. When I'm playing, put a handful of bee pollen, and that gets me my stamina to oftentimes finish my matches. So I just want to say I resonate with all of what you said. Your information on the COVID really needs to get out there to more and more people, because I'm finding that people are so afraid. And when they see the people that are not afraid, they are even more afraid. They're more afraid of the people that are not afraid than the people that are afraid. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I just try to be the example, and I'm sure you can relate to that, of just letting people know that, hey, we don't have to be, we're in the driver's seat in this situation with respect to the COVID and whatnot. So, so I'm excited about the things you've talked about, and yes, we could go on and on. So,
yeah, thank you.
What's the name of your book? What's the name of your book?
The name of my book is An Introduction to Bee Medicine. It's on Amazon. You can get a copy, and they've really discounted it. So just trying to get information out there regarding the bee products, and certainly bee pollen and royal jelly and propolis as well.
Now, so you know what? I would like to hear your opinion on the difference between those things you just mentioned, because my experience is kind of strange. Most people really like the royal jelly over bee pollen. And I enjoy royal jelly on occasion, but bee pollen seems to be my standard. And bee propolis, I would use maybe as more of an antiseptic situation, but maybe you can extrapolate on those three things: bee pollen, royal jelly, and bee propolis.
Yes. Well, of course, there are three different products from the beehive. First, the royal jelly. The royal jelly is a concentrated mix of food of bee pollen, honey. The bees add some other enzymes to it. It's very, very concentrated. So I find that for royal jelly, the effects are almost immediate from a health and wellness standpoint. Energy, and I'm talking about pure royal jelly, not the capsules and whatnot. For myself, I like royal jelly, especially for skin, but as the go-to product, I'm more of the bee pollen as well. I take the bee pollen for athletics, energy, male hormones, because the other thing about the bee pollen too, it gets at the prostate. It nourishes the prostate.
Yes.
And certainly all of us men should be, we should look at the prostate as something that's very important from a health standpoint. So the propolis, I use the propolis more for antiseptic, or the propolis, the tinctures for sore throats. I do like the propolis salves. So if you got any kind of blisters or anything like that, the propolis is excellent. It's actually a natural penicillin. And, and certainly it's used and it has a lot of different applications.
Now, one of the interesting things about the bee pollen, I was talking with someone and they were saying that eggs were the protein. So I just happened to Google to see what Google had to say about that, because my opinion was always what it was, and I just wanted to see if there was what other opinions were. And in looking it up, in Essene, I don't eat eggs because the white of the egg pastes up the colon, and the yolk of the egg clogs up the arteries. And bee pollen, incidentally, the egg was one of the ways that Google was saying you could get B12. So what I found was one day I couldn't lift my leg. Going up, I couldn't lift my leg without pain, but I could do it, but without pain. Making the long story short, I had stopped taking bee pollen, and then I started taking bee pollen again. Within 2 days, I was lifting my leg again. And so that was my answer for vitamin B12. And when I Googled, can you get B12 from bee pollen? It said no. And I said, well, wait a minute. I'm living that truth. I know that you can get that from bee pollen. So I kept going. I kept Googling and seeing if I could find any other opinions. Finally, I came across Dr. No, K-N-O-W, who said, yes, you can get B12 from bee pollen. So what's your opinion about that?
Yes, I think from my researches and whatnot, the entire bee vitamin family is inherent in bee pollen. And when you're talking bee, the bee family, that's, what is that, 2, 3, 5, 6 pathogenic acid, and the 12. I don't know if I missed 1 or 2 in there.
All the bees, that's good.
All the bees are in the bee pollen. The bee pollen is special. They have actually used bee pollen can actually help in chemotherapy. when a person is taking chemotherapy, it can absorb the effects of the radiation,
That's right.
among other things.
That's right.
And again, I think all men should take bee pollen as a matter of course for the nourishment of the prostate, because I always think that the prostate as a gland has to be nourished. And I think that men go through life and they get to a certain age and the prostate flare up, but that's because as a gland, it's not, it has a lack of nourishment, not just the bee pollen. You can certainly use saw palmetto or zinc, and I rotate them out. I'll take bee pollen, saw palmetto, zinc as a matter of, 24/7, I'm taking something as it relates to the prostate.
Mentioning that zinc, we were talking to Vanessa earlier about minerals. So they're in right there. And incidentally, bee pollen, like I mentioned, the amino acids are the foundation of the proteins. So that bee pollen is food in itself.
It's a perfect food.
That's right. That's right. Just like a banana has a lot of, is also called a perfect food. A lot of people, however, are opposed because they say it's animal product. But I say, well, the bee gets the pollen from the flowers. I'm not eating the bee. I'm eating the bee pollen. But then, of course, they do mix something with,
some enzymes that they manufacture.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Some real strict vegans, they have a problem with it. But more and more as evidence goes and as time goes on, I find that more and more strict vegans are adopting honey, royal jelly, and bee pollen in their diets.
That's right. That's right. It's about the nutrients. And so, if you would, I'm writing this down. Give me your name and then the title of the book.
Okay. It's called An Introduction to Bee Medicine. And my name, Charles L. Shipp.
Charles, say that again?
Charles L. Shipp, S-H-I-P-P is the last name.
Okay.
And you can get it on Amazon. I think it's nominally priced now. I don't make but pennies per book. That's how Amazon is.
Yeah. Yeah, I want you guys to connect as well, Don. I thought I had made the connection, but I want you guys to connect because before I met you, Charles was sort of my go-to person. He supplied me with my bee products, and then he left the country for a while to go to live a healthier life over in Ecuador. So he's back.
I have a tennis student from Ecuador who just contacted me, and
Nice.
And when you mention Ecuador, actually Chile comes to mind because Chile. Yeah, is a country that have instituted, or they were in the process. I don't know if they actually have made it a law yet, but they were in the process of making a law for the whole country that all food must be grown organically. And by looking at that is what, gave me the idea we should be doing that in America.
Absolutely. Well, Ecuador too. They don't allow GMO. I think they're just starting to push some small amounts of GMO, but most of the time when you're eating the fruits and vegetables is right from the farms, and they're, it's one of the richest countries soil-wise for foodstuffs in the world. And so most of the people that are there, they can take note that once they're eating just the fruits and vegetables from those areas, your body change. It's not a lot of excess. And I find personally, in America, I blowed up a little bit, my face, and but when I'm down there, I slim down, and and I feel even healthier because I'm walking everywhere. That's part of it too. Everybody walks 2-3 miles. That's just as the day go by. So yeah, but I love the concept of health and wellness, and I think I appreciate your work, and I think more and more of the people have to come this way, and it's necessary. That's why I think the COVID has to come out, because the planet has to cleanse itself consciously, physically, and I think, as you alluded to, that Saturn-Jupiter conjunction on the 21st pushed us into an Aquarian age. Now you have, a couple of days ago, the Sun, Mercury, and so this energy is totally different. It's light, it's imaginative, it's quick. We can do more with less. We can get more done. All we got to do is push ourselves out there to do it. So I'm excited, as I can tell you and Henry and everybody that's on this call. We can go for it now. At least I feel that way. And listening to you, Diane, I'm sure you feel that way. And I know Henry and Vanessa and Ken and Charles, feeling that same way to an extent.
Yeah, indeed. Well, listen, we're coming up on the top of the hour again. So again, anyone that has other chores they have to do for this Saturday, feel free to drop off. I'm going to keep the channel open just to chat. Donnie, I don't know if you have to leave or not. I know you told me.
Yeah, my schedule is to about 3:15.
Okay, I know you told me you had a tennis match.
That's right.
So I don't want to keep you. So
look, I need to leave, but I would enjoy just to have an evening with Fred and Charles, just to discuss just what they were discussing then, and let them just pull from each other, because it's so informative.
Yeah, well, we should plan. Maybe you can plan that, or we can plan it. We could just do that just as friends.
Because that was just a wealth of information just there.
Yeah.
And I can imagine just what they could do just to piggyback off each other, just start asking, just talking.
Right.
And so much, and for those of us who are trying to get there, we can learn so much from those two.
Correct. Yeah. All right.
But hey, I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate Father Don, you did a great job. And Charles, you really came in and chimed in, because I'm going to get my bee pollen now.
All right. Hey,
incidentally,
get his book too, Charles.
Hey, I wrote it in my notes in my phone.
Charles, okay, we have two Charleses here, but I have a question for the author on the bee pollen, Charles. The thing that I experienced with bee pollen was very few people actually can grow bees, produce organic bee pollen, and they have to be so specially, done. So now I'm finding in Whole Foods the organic bee pollen. Is it difficult to get organic bee pollen?
No, it's not. When you say organic, I mean, you might be talking in the purest form. You might be talking about maybe beekeepers that have colonies in a controlled environment that they're going to like a local orchard or something to that effect. I know out here in California, I'm in Northern California, I know some beekeepers, there's one in particular that they have probably some of the best pollen. And up here, a lot of the big beekeepers they're pollinators. So they pollinate as a matter of farming. They pollinate the crops starting in March with the apples, all the way down to California. They call it the bread basket. So I find that some of the pollens that they have are probably as pure as I've seen going outside of the country, because you go outside of the country, certainly it's different, because they use less mechanization in their agriculture setups. But I do know some a beekeeper that has a store here. His pollen is some of the best, sweetest, softest. His pollen is, it's not hard. It's the real moist, melt in your mouth.
That's right.
Not in your hands kind of bee pollen.
And no legs or wings or heads in there.
Right. All of that. Their pollen is it's excellent. It's excellent as pollens go. And you being a connoisseur of pollens, you would probably like the pollens that that they have. Also, the pollens too, as you know, they come from the plants. So in California, it seems to be more sunlight out here, and so I find that the pollens are a lot more sweeter, especially if the beekeeper have the colonies out where they have grapefruit trees, or the pollens taste nice and fruity and nice and flavorful. So I, in that regard, I think that the pollens are they're a little bit better, I found, here in California. And I'm not just that I'm partial to California, but having pollens everywhere, because I've sampled pollens all over the country and all over the world. The pollens in California are some of the best.
Okay.
All right. Well, listen, folks, it's been great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're probably going to transition off and spend some time with the family. And
Okay.
but I'm going to take you up on that, Charles Upchurch, on us just getting together one evening.
Okay.
I'll set it up.
Nice.
We can do it on this channel. Charles, you still have your Zoom channel?
I do.
Well, I meant Charles Upchurch.
But I'm not up and running, so it's probably best for you to.
Okay, I'll just check with Marianne and see when we have a open. We'll get together. All right. Well, Ken, do you want to have any remarks? You've been quiet today, and that's unusual for you.
Oh, one of the elements that didn't follow through on last night was getting a good night's sleep, so that's part of it.
I understand. Okay.
This has been really interesting. Henry and I have I've been joining him on the weekly spiritual happy hours now for several weeks, and one of the themes that is recurring is synchronicities, and this entire afternoon has been chock full of them for me. There's just been an alignment of all sorts of things from the information that you all provide. I really am very grateful. One of the things I was just going to mention, just because of my conditioning and orientation from more of a science and psychology background, is I had a son refer me to a program called Noom. You may have heard it advertised as NOOM, and it's a program that uses cognitive behavioral therapy psychology to kind of orient you to your eating. But the synchronicity is that it really just was overlapping with almost everything you talked about, Don. I mean, it's just so you came to it in a different way. I think there is that idea of message finding you in the way that speaks to you, and so this Noom program kind of got me started, but it has really changed my eating habits, and I can just see everything that you shared is kind of just being a progression to get deeper into it, when you talk so many times about needing to study and learn, experiment and test, and we are kind of conditioned in our society to look for the quick fix and just give me the answer, give me the pill, and move on. Fun. But I think the reality is that I started realizing, well, the Noom was just my introduction, and so it really is part of the lifelong journey. I think just getting to learn more about things, and this has been really helpful. The other thing I wanted to mention was, while we were waiting for you to come on, one of the other participants, Betty McKay, I think her name was Betty, she offered that she's in healthcare. I don't know if she's a nurse or what she's done, but she said that she's frequently around COVID positive patients. And then she shared with us in the chat, if you have that open, it's probably still the first posting of a supplement cocktail that many health providers are using, and they're seeing positive results with that in the COVID patients, as well as it's being used as a prophylactic treatment. So
Is it organic?
well, you can see the list, or I can read it to you. It's not. It's basically not necessarily organic. It's basically just supplement. I can read it to you. It's 500 milligrams of vitamin C a day, quercetin 250 milligrams twice a day, zinc 50 mg a day, melatonin anywhere from 0.3 to 2 milligrams at night, vitamin D 1,000 to 4,000 a day, and then also maybe aspirin 80 milligrams a day. Kind of
What was that last one?
aspirin, but in the
So,
baby aspirin form, the 81 milligrams a day. So apparently they're seeing positive results from this. I'm just curious if you've heard about this. Obviously, with your diet and recommendations, you're probably getting all of this without having to take supplements. Just curious your thoughts on that, since it came at the beginning of this.
yeah. Okay, here's my thought. Firstly, Mother Nature's aspirin is white willow bark. So I would put white willow bark in there, because if we're using regular aspirin, that's a problem. That's going to create disease in the long run, because it's going to poison the blood. After a certain amount of time of consuming things that are man-made, the blood will eventually start to break down, and it'll become a poison. So all those other ingredients, I think, are fine. And like I said, I would put the white willow bark in there in the place of the aspirin. Now, the other thing that's so important to help to dissipate mucus and to maybe prevent, by the way, COVID is the nose, when it's filled with mucus, that gives the virus something to latch onto. So when there's no mucus, there's nothing for it to latch onto. And of course, the poisons that go along with the mucus. In other words, the accumulated waste. But Echinacea and golden seal, organic Echinacea and golden seal, Gaia puts out a good product. The tincture is best. I would recommend that. Also, elderberry root. Now, I personally have not used elderberry root, but they say it's an excellent way to prevent something like COVID, or at least to prevent colds and to revitalize the system. So the number one thing I recommend is the golden seal and Echinacea. And whenever anyone consumes golden seal and Echinacea, they have to follow it up by replacing the good bacteria with acidophilus. And so, you can get that from tablets. Some people, if they're still eating dairy, they can replace that with yogurt. And there's also a certain kind of sauerkraut that can replace the good bacteria. But golden seal and Echinacea is where I would go if I've eaten something, like if I've had, brown rice and some other mucus producing foods, I'll take that to dissipate that mucus and neutralize any poisons.
Okay, that's helpful. The other thing I'm wondering, and I appreciate you mentioning the Gaia brand, because as with a lot of the things that we discuss, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that just try to make a quick buck off of things, and so finding the right quality and the genuine products that truly are good for you, and that also ties back into the idea of study and learning. But does your book include references to products so that people can know what are really worthwhile buying versus having to sort through just the tons and tons of things that are on the market that the FDA always kind of warns that supplements don't have to go through their approval process. So you really don't know many times when you buy what you're really getting.
Yes, in my book, I do mention herbal application. Now I'm coming up with, actually I have an illustration, and I think Henry has a copy, or maybe Charles can give it to Henry and Henry can give it to you.
I think Charles has it, I don't, yeah.
Okay, in that illustration answers your question, because there are products like Kaolic Garlic 106. That's an excellent product because it has hawthorn berry. It rebuilds the walls of the heart. It has cayenne pepper that strengthens the cardiovascular system, arteries, capillaries, veins, nourishes the lungs, and of course the garlic that gives you power and helps to fight against bacteria and viruses. In my book, I don't mention the Kaolic garlic, but I do mention the ingredients that I just talked about. And of course, I mentioned bee pollen and the Echinacea and the golden seal. So yes is your answer. It's in my book of various herbal applications.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, again, this has been excellent and well worth the wait and the extended time. So sharing that with us.
Well, good to hear that. Don, would you like to have any closing words before we shut it down?
Well, Henry, I just want to thank you and thank everyone for the opportunity to be of service today and to have an interest in this. I think this is something that is so important to humanity that let's continue to investigate. Okay, it's really having sight. Study, investigate, test, and experiment. And my apology, my deepest apology for not understanding the time that we were supposed to meet. And I'm sure we'll work that out. But, you know, the important thing is we did meet and we talked about it and we got this information to some people. So thank you so much for your support, Henry. I think you're doing the kind of job that will help humanity to find that which is lost. So I believe that you're doing a tremendous service to humanity. And I just want to thank you. I can't put it in words. Words aren't good enough. But I do thank you for all your support. You and Vanessa are truly my brother and sister in spirit. And all good wishes for Peace Profound.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. And yeah, I thank the Cosmic for having led us over on that side of town that day in Philadelphia. So it's been a blessed journey as a result. And you know, Don referred to that which is lost, and I won't get into any details, but just for those that may not, I know most everybody on the call is familiar with it, but it's the lost word, and I want to articulate that in layman's term, in mundane term. It's the vibrations that came from the primordial expression of divinity. And the other night we talked about on our spiritual happy hour call, it's being referred to now by science as the quantum field. So science is rediscovering the essence of the quantum field, and it's between the science and the modern day mystics, we're encouraging everyone to connect with that field and discover that which was lost and bring it back to humanity. So Don, that's what you have assisted us today in doing, and everybody on the call as well. And that's what we, with the Institute for Global Transformation, through this channel, this venue, will continue to do. So thank you again for gracing us today, Don. Go out and order the book. It took me one day to get it. When I had the digital copy for a year, but when I finally said I'm going to order it online, of course I paid the price for it, Don, because I wanted to have it for this call. So I had been looking on my tablet, but I wanted to have a hard copy to go along beside my other author on the call. So I'm surrounded by scholars, and for that I'm thankful. All right, well, listen, thanks everyone. I'm gonna end the call and let everyone. Don has a tennis match. Let's send him light for having fun on that tennis match. I'll let him decide how. I don't know if it's a student or whatever, but just have fun.
Thank you.
All right. Peace profound, everyone. Unmute yourself, Vanessa. They can't hear you. She's trying to.
It was nice to see everyone.
Okay.
Have a good day.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Peace profound.
Peace profound.